Hi, I'm Z Garcia, and you're watching The Dice Tower.
Hi, I'm Eric Summerer, and here's what's coming from The Dice Tower this week.
Hey folks, I'm Tom Vasel, and you're watching the news for October 7th, 2013. Now, I apologize, first of all, because I was a little sick over the weekend, still am, trying to catch up from that. And so a couple things that I was planning to do are slightly delayed. We plan to start my top 100 games of all time list this week. I still plan to do so, but it might be delayed towards the end of the week, and for that I apologize. And Melody's top 100 list, but keep an eye on those. For the people who are like the top 100 list, like Ryan Metzler's is coming to a close, and Eric's, and we did a top 10 list last week. If you like that sort of thing, once again, I'd like to point to you, DicetowerAudio.com, where if you just like the audio version of these news videos and other videos that we do, you can download and just listen to the audio of that there. Anyhow, lots of great things coming out this week. I hope so. Let's get to the news. For the news this week, a couple things. First of all, Toy Hall of Fame. The Toy Hall of Fame is having you allowed to basically vote on what you would like to see added to the Toy Hall of Fame. Now, Toy Hall of Fame is kind of weird because they've added things, and they add toys, and that includes games in the past, and they've added things like the stick, whatever. But anyhow, so this year there's several things up for that you can vote on, including 2 board games. One is chess, and the other is Clue. Actually, chess is kind of odd because I've never looked at chess as a toy. I've never looked at chess as anything but a very serious game. Games that are already in the Toy Hall of Fame are Dominoes, Candyland, Checkers, Life, Monopoly, Playing Cards, and Scrabble. So based on that, I could see chess getting in before Clue, but you never know. I don't really know what the criteria is, and besides, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles will probably beat both of these. IDW opens a new board game division. They're opening this in cooperation with Pandasaurs, who brought Yido to America and also Lost Valley and several other games. They have a lot of licenses with their comic book section that this should be interesting to see what they do. They've announced a couple games. The first is Kill Shakespeare. Thank you, that sounds nice. And 30 Days of Night. So I don't know much more. I don't know who the designers of these games are, but this should be interesting to see where this heads. Fantasy Flight has given out more information on the Lieutenant packs for Descent. I've mentioned these before. I'm very, very excited about these. They're coming out very soon. But they're showing more pictures of the different lieutenants that you'll be able to insert into your campaigns of Descent 2.0. Cannot wait to do that to the players in my game. Z-Man has released more information on Carcassonne South Seas. Apparently in Carcassonne South Seas, when you build different areas, like normal Carcassonne, instead of getting points, you'll get resources, and then you'll be able to use those resources and ship things off to get points. I'm not a real big fan of sometimes of the get resources and ship things off, but this looks cool, and I like the Carcassonne mechanic of finishing things. It sounds interesting, and it's kind of, I think, another way to get points there. A few rules have been released online. We're hearing some more about Glass Road from Z-Man Games and from Uwe Rosenberg, which seems similar to Oren Labor, has that same wheel. And they've released the rules for Caverna. I believe Lookout Games is doing this one. Caverna Cave Farmers, which is supposedly kind of a sequel of sorts to Agricola. And when I look at the rules, lo and behold, it does look a lot like Agricola. So that seems interesting. Lots of interesting things on Kickstarter. A huge Kickstarter, the Reaper Bones 2. Reaper Bones 1 did over 4 million. Reaper Bones 2 is already up to 1.4. I believe it got to 1 million in 24 hours. Lots of miniatures. If you want to use miniatures for any game in existence, this is a whole pile for a very inexpensive price. Star Realms deck building game, which is coming out simultaneously for the tablets and the actual physical deck building game. This one's designed by Robert Dougherty from Ascension and Darwin Castle, who's quite well known for his participation in the Magic the Gathering world. So this is a new deck building game, looks interesting. Powerbot Dice. Now this one I don't know. I mean, the game itself might be horrible, but it looks cool. You get a bunch of power bots that you'll be fighting against each other, and each one of them comes with a couple custom dice for that power bot. That just sounds very interesting. And Eagle Games is re-releasing Dawn Rise of the Acolytes, which is a miniatures game with Little Aliens. It's kind of odd that Eagle Games is doing a miniatures game, because as far as I know, they've not done one before, but I don't know what happened to the first Kickstarter, but the second one seems to be going strong, and it certainly looks good. For News of the Week, Games Magazine has announced their 2014 winners. For the abstract game, they picked Kulami. I have not played that one, but it sounds interesting. Advanced strategy, they picked Zulkin, which makes sense. Family game, Via Appia, which is one that I would gladly nominate for family game. For card game, Morels. Not sure I agree on that one. Morels wasn't a bad game. I don't know that it was card game of the year. Strategy, Triassic Terror. See, it's kind of weird. I don't really know how to differentiate between strategy and advanced strategy. I mean, obviously, Zulkin is heavier than Triassic Terror, but at the same time, it doesn't matter. Triassic Terror is pretty cool. You should check it out. I did a review of it a couple weeks ago. And for party game Homestretch from R&R Games, haven't had a chance to play that. Saw it, but haven't had a chance to play it. I'm very interested, though, in their Game of the Year, which is Garden Dice, designed by Doug Bass and produced by Meriday Games. Now, Garden Dice is a game where you roll dice and you put them in a garden. I haven't played it, and I really would like to look at it. But just from looking at it, it just seems like an interesting game. But it's kind of shocking that Games Magazine picked this as Game of the Year over so many other games that people might say Game of the Year. Now, possibly it's because of the audience for Games Magazine. Even more possibly, if you read the review of Garden Dice, you'll see that you have to understand that the Games Magazine top 100 games of the year are picked by one person. It's kind of like if I took my top 100 games of the year and said that they were the Dice Tower Awards. It'd be very similar to that. Now, Dice Tower Awards are not picked that way. It's like 40 people or so, maybe 50 people voting on them. But it's one person, and he said that his wife was in hospital for an extended period of time, and he played this with them, and they loved it. So I can see that would be his criteria for picking it. Now, I criticized it a little bit online, but I said I should play it because maybe it will blow me away. So I will try to get a copy of this to see if it really is Game of the Year material. But anyway, these awards have some bearing, at least on the Games Magazine audience, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. In the Dice Tower Network, a lot of podcasts released stuff last week. We had Ludology number 66. They had Corey Kineska from Fantasy Flight Games on, and they talk about expansions and adding expansions to a game. Plaid Hat number 108 talks about marketing. By the way, I interviewed Colby from Plaid Hat Games on the last week's Board Game University. Little Metal Dog number 65 is Anthony Riccano on, as well as Michael Coe. Interviews both of them. Gameopolis 28.5 takes a review of Forbidden Desert. Secret Cabal number 51 reviews the game Nothing Personal and continues their look at the top 50 games on Board Game Geek. Board Game University number 20 this week will be posted Thursday, and this time I'll be interviewing Devin Lowe, who has a lot to do with the development of Magic the Gathering. We talk a lot about that, and also about Legendary Marvel Heroes deck building game. Blue Peg, Pink Peg number 7, they talk about Galaxy Trucker and gaming with non-gamers. Dice Tower Showdown, we'll have a new one of those released this coming Friday, where we talk about, is Twilight Struggle, does it deserve to be the number one game on Board Game Geek? And Ticket to Ride versus Settlers of Catan versus Ticket to Ride. So that will be an interesting, very interesting, already recorded, you guys will like these. We have 2 new podcasts that joined our network. The first is Happy Mitten Games. They are going to be an independent publisher, so they'll be talking about that on one end, but they also have a lot of interviews with different people in the industry, so you can check them out. Also, the Game Pit, new podcast from Great Britain, and in their latest podcast, they talked about Essen and the things to look forward to Essen Spiel. And as you can see in this show, I've already mentioned several games. That's kind of where the whole focus of October looks at the game fair in Spiel, and we'll probably have more news and views on that in future. Our question of the week is from Logan, and he was asking about Pandemic specifically, but in general, he said that he's played Pandemic and one person tends to tell everybody else what to do. And how do you deal with somebody like that? How do you deal with what we often call an alpha gamer, somebody who calls the shots? Now, this has always been an interesting topic for me because there's a lot of cooperative games that lend themselves to it. If it's everybody against the game, What stops one person from basically dictating it for everybody else what to do? And some games have actually tried to get around that, like the Dark Angel game, the card game for Fantasy Flight. There are cards you draw and you have to make the decision before you show everybody else the card. So that's an interesting mechanic. But the other games don't. Now obviously this isn't a huge problem, otherwise these cooperative games wouldn't be the smash successes that they are. But it is certainly a problem in some groups, and I've played in groups where there is an alpha gamer, and I always have to ask myself, am I the alpha gamer? Am I the person who is telling everybody what to do? Now in my group I think we have 50 alpha gamers, so everybody tells everybody else what to do, and so it doesn't seem to be much of a problem. And that's always one thing you can do, is if there's one person who tells everyone what to do, introduce somebody else to the game who tells everybody what to do. Secondly, you don't have to listen to them. I mean, if someone's telling you what to do, you don't have to take their advice. But I would seriously speak to that person. You say, look, you're making this no fun, you're telling everybody what to do, and if they can't handle it, then don't play these games with that person. I know that before I've played with games where someone tells everyone what to do, and we will kind of make joking remarks about that as the game goes by to let them know that we're not really keen on that. We would like to make some of the decisions on our own. And if you are the alpha gamer, what you should do is you should say, well, here's what I think we should do, but this is also good. I always try to present multiple options of what I think we should do so that the person agrees. And sometimes just to sit there and bite your tongue and let them make a decision. It's hard to bite your tongue sometimes, but it's a very possible thing to do. That's how I deal with alpha gamers. For reviews this week, I feel pretty bad that last week I was able to get out 7 reviews, although the contributors got out some reviews, so I think we put out maybe 11 or 12 reviews last week, and I'm sorry we kind of went down in number when I'm trying to get so many more. So this week, sick or no sick, we're going to get out as many reviews as we possibly can. I've personally already recorded 13 of them, and my goal is to get 30 reviews out this week. I know that's a lot of reviews, but we're trying to catch up. There's a flood of new games coming in, and once Essen's over, probably a flood of more games. So we want to get you guys as much information as possible so you know which of these games are the ones you're looking for. So that's pretty much all I can tell you about reviews this week. Just expect a lot of them. Once again, each week we look at games that I'm keeping for whatever reason or not. People are interested in what's on my shelf. Today we're looking at a fairly small shelf with only 5 games, and they fit in there pretty nicely, don't they? These 5 games I keep for various reasons. Horse Fever is an incredibly fun betting on horses and then messing with the horses that people bet on game. It's very unique, unusual. I really enjoy it. Key Largo is one of the best family games that there is. Going out and diving for treasures in Key Largo. Of course, watching out for monsters, a lot of fun. Shipyard, some people might be surprised that I like Shipyard so much because it is such a heavy Euro game about building ships. It has multiple rondels. I've never been a huge fan of the rondel mechanic, but in this one I just like it. I like the whole aspect of building the different ships. Fantastica is so cool. It's a deck building game for families, and it has just really cool Victorian artwork. And Firenze here is a tower building game, one that I enjoy quite a bit. I like the mechanic in it, where you can pick cards and pass over other cards, but you have to drop things off on those cards. It's really neat. So these are 5 very different games, really, but ones that I'm all glad to have in my collection, and I don't really foresee any of these dropping out too soon. So let's talk today a little bit about consistency. There are many people, perhaps some of those out there, who are thinking about starting up a blog or a podcast or reviewing or a series of reviews like we have here at the Dice Tower. And I'm always for that. I think the more of them, the better. You know, competition is interesting between the different podcasts and such, and that's always fun and exciting and hopefully never too serious. And obviously competition exists. But at the same time, the more people doing it, the more the hobby will rise. This is why I've never really been that upset about tabletop. Sure, their views dwarf ours, but they're getting more people interested in board gaming, and so that helps everybody out and brings more listeners and viewers to the Dice Tower itself. So that's great. But what do you do if you want to start a blog? And when people ask me, a lot of people ask me for advice, what's my advice? And my biggest advice is to be consistent. Or in essence, get in it for the long haul. Because this is what will often happen when you start your own video series or podcast or blog or reviews. You'll do it for a little while, and it's very exciting at first. You'll get some feedback. Sometimes you don't get a lot of feedback right away, but you get a little bit of feedback, and people will like what you're doing, and that's exciting, and you'll go on. And then there will come a day where you just don't feel like doing it, so you don't do it that day. And then a little bit later, you don't feel like doing it, you don't do it. And pretty soon, what we have called pod fading happens, where the podcast just kind of fades away, and the people don't do it. And this is compounded by the more people that you have involved. At the Dice Tower, I've tried to mitigate this by getting lots of people involved, especially on our show, Dice Tower. So if contributors go away, they fade out because they get tired of doing it, no big deal. We have other contributors coming in. So we kind of have a cyclical nature in that regard. And if you listen to our show today, as opposed to our show 100 episodes ago, you'll notice that almost every contributor is different. But some people do stick around for the long haul. I like to say that, we're coming up on 10 years here at the Dice Tower. Well, we've been actually doing it for more than 10 years now. And that's exciting and interesting, but what have we done to do it so long? When I say you need to be consistent, what does that mean? Well, first of all, I think that it needs to remain interesting to you. It's no secret, I think, that the more you play games, you're going to get at least a little bit jaded. The very first time you play a Euro game, for example, it is a fascinating experience. Trade these cubes for this. That's a really cool concept, and it is a cool concept. But when you play the 50th one, not so cool anymore. Just like the first time you play Descent, and you go into a dungeon, and you're like, wow, this is really cool, fighting off monsters and doing this. And then the 50th dungeon crawl, it's not so cool anymore because you've seen these mechanics. But I think the hobby itself can still remain interesting. Even though you've seen things before, you're always on the lookout for what's new, what's interesting. And for me, that's fascinating. And as long as the interest level is high, I can remain consistent. Coupled with that is joy. I've seen a lot of people lately talking about how the games these days are seeming samey, and they're not really enjoying playing games as much anymore. Well, in essence, that means you've lost your joy for the hobby. And if you lost your joy for the hobby, I don't think you should be, you should probably take a break and go do a different hobby for a while. Because if something starts grating on you, it's kind of like any, you get a new job, you go work at the job, and everything's wonderful for the first couple months, and after a while you're like, it's not so wonderful. And that can happen. I don't think board games are for everybody. I think everybody should play board games at least a couple times, but I don't think the hobby is for everybody, especially the hobby of podcasting, reviewing, doing video reviews, etc. So I think you need to retain that joy. Now, as a sub-point to that, and as a lead into my next point, that joy needs to come from what you're doing, not necessarily from your feedback. Now, I get a lot of positive feedback here at the Dice Tower. It is a very enjoyable thing when people write in and say that they enjoy the reviews, and you see that. But I'm telling you, there is a very, very loud vocal minority out there who criticize everything and everybody. For example, a few weeks ago, there was a thread on Board Game Geek where people asked what their favorite reviewer was. And then a lot of people came in and talked about their favorite reviewer, but then other people came in to point out why they didn't like such and such a reviewer. And so the negativity just abounds. Almost every review I write, somebody will come on and tell me either I was too positive or too negative or didn't get the rules right or didn't play the game enough, blah, 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 blah. So if I got my joy completely from the feedback of others, that would be a devastating thing. And if that's you, then I would recommend almost probably not getting into blogging and podcasting and video recording because people are mean and I get a lot of negative feedback. Now, fortunately, I have a fairly thick skin, although occasionally it does get to you when people are negative. But at the same time, you need to be able to roll that off and just keep going and be consistent. And if that was the only reason I was doing it, I would stop doing it. But I love games and I love sharing and I can really focus on the positive feedback and get my joy from that. And so that helps be consistent. And then another thing about being consistent is to just push yourself to do it. Make goals. What are your goals? I found that when I've made goals to get things done, I will be much more, I'll get a lot more done than I normally would. See, I'm sick this week, and I'm sick right now a little bit, and, my wife made me rest for the past, 20 hours. It's driving me nuts, okay? So here I am, I'm back, and I'm going to do this because, first of all, I can't stand sitting around, but secondly, I know that if I'm sick and I put this off, and then I'll let other things get in the way. I need to power through, even sometimes when I don't feel like doing it. Although I will say, once I get in front of the camera, it becomes a lot easier. But the fact is you have to keep going and have to keep pushing on. Have a goal in mind. You're going to start a blog. What are you going to talk about? How many times are you going to do it? And then do those times. Keep pushing. Keep going onward. And I encourage that to everybody out there because that's the number one thing I'm looking for. I want to listen to a podcast or read a blog. I don't want to go there one day and find out, wow, they haven't updated in like 3-4 months. So I think it's okay to have these things, but let's finish. Let's finish the task. I think that Cody and John, when they did their podcast, they did a good job. They went to a certain number, and then they said, we're done. And they had a goal that they would have 5 more episodes and finish. And they went through and followed through on that, and they were done. And they were done on their own terms. They didn't just kind of whimper away. And I think that was an excellent way to finish things. They did it. They said it was enjoyable, wasn't as fun for them, and so they got out of it. And I think that if you don't enjoy doing this, you should probably get out of it. But for those of you who are interested, I know a lot of people are interested in doing reviews and things, then get into the hobby. But you got to watch why you do it, and you got to be consistent. My number one thing, be consistent, and people will eventually start watching and enjoying and reading and commenting. And that's about it for this time, folks. I hope that you are still enjoying the Dice Tower Network. Watch our videos. You can find out all the stuff about our podcast at dicetowernetwork.com. Dice Tower itself, we're always publishing things there. Thank you for everybody who came into the top 100 People's Choice Live last Saturday. And then I will be doing another one, probably not this week, but next week. So we'll be continuing that on. But you never know when live stuff might pop up. I might do a chat. We might do a live recording of a game just as a test. We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, time to get back to recording a lot of reviews for you guys. My name's Tom Vasel, and you're watching The Dice Tower. Shut the fridge.
To find out more about all of our podcasts, check out dicetowernetwork.com. To see a listing of our videos, head to dicetower.com. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Cool Stuff Incorporated, where you can buy games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock.